Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our fourth day of the online protest. I want to say something that I said the other night because I think it's just so pertinent in this moment, and that is what Frederick Douglass said, that struggle is a never, that without struggle, there can be no progress. Let me say that again. Without struggle, there can be no progress. And then I want to tie that to something my mother said, that struggle is a never ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. We have been in this freedom struggle for a long time. And what we have witnessed over the past 8 days, 9 days now, going into protest on the streets and with us online for the last 4 days is progress. But this progress is generational. It's step by step, stage by stage. We have to remain vigilant. And today, good news, Minneapolis. I want you to hear this. Minneapolis agrees to ban the chokehold and require officers to intervene against unauthorized use of force. This story would have been a little bit different if that had already been the case, but we applaud that progress because of the struggle that is taking place in the streets of America and as we do what we do online here. So I want you to hear that again. They've agreed to ban the chokeholds and require officers to intervene against unauthorized use of force. I have to read the other part. There's also in this agreement that it passed City Council unanimously. Authorization to use chemical agents, rubber bullets, flashbangs, batons, and marking rounds requires that the chief, police chief, or the designated deputy chief authorizes it to use these crowd control weapons. That's another stage of the progress. So what has happened in Minneapolis is what we're trying to get everybody to amplify here online as we sign the petition so that we can ban the chokehold all over the nation by getting Congress to act on this issue. So I'm going to invite now Benita Hampton-Smith, who has joined me for the last 4 nights, producer of the King Center's Beloved Community Talks. As we continue the conversation tonight, our protest tonight, we welcome your comments. Tag 3 people, if you will, invite them to this online protest as we continue this momentum. Good evening, Benita. How are you?
I am doing, in light of all of this, I am doing well, Dr. King, and just want to thank you for all that you're doing. I've seen you everywhere, from Jimmy Fallon to out in the streets protesting, telling people don't stop. And so just want to appreciate you for just advancing your parents' legacy and just thank you for all the work you're doing. This is the hour to really echo your father's sentiments, and you're doing an outstanding job. So just salute you and just say thank God for you and the work that you're doing. Well, I guess I should salute because I'm not a soldier.
Right,
but
right.
Well, you know what?
I get you.
Yeah, I'm a soldier. I'm a soldier in God's army, though.
Yes, and you're a soldier in this nonviolent struggle that we have.
Absolutely.
Against
Absolutely.
injustice and equity. There's something very disturbing that recently happened. There was an opportunity for this nation to pass anti-lynching legislation, and there's one person. And we need to bombard his email, his phone number in the Senate, and that's Senator Rand Paul. He should not get away with hijacking justice like this. It is time for this nation to acknowledge and put into law anti-lynching legislation. So I wanted you to be aware of that because we're going to be amplifying our voices on that.
And Dr. King, in 2020,
should
we anti-lynching?
There's always one. There's always one, unfortunately.
Always.
So that's why we have to be vigilant.
Yeah. Also, Dr. King, we do want to take time to say to Breonna Taylor's family, we are with you today. Happy birthday to your beautiful spirit angel. We just send love your way. We send just our heart is with you today, and we
send comfort your way too.
Yes, peace
in the midst of this.
Peace, absolutely. So we just speak her name today, Breonna Taylor. We love you. We send love. You are an angel, and we know that justice will prevail. We know that no charges have been brought. That's another thing. We need to be
Exactly.
we need to be conscious. That's what this platform is for: giving voice to justice and standing for justice and calling out injustice. It's time to stop.
Yes. So let's all
Yeah,
just lift up our voices to on our platforms to demand that someone be charged and those officers be charged and arrested as it relates to Brianna.
absolutely.
And so we're gonna continue tonight on art activism and advocacy. And you know, we've been wrestling over the last couple of days, me and Benita, with the language advocacy.
Yeah.
Um, and and
And ally, Dr. King.
and ally, because you know, my father said something. We have a world house. We all exist in this world house with all of our different cultures, backgrounds, and nationalities, and races, and ethnicities, and religions, and so on and so on and so on. And the reality is, he said, we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or together we'll be forced to perish as fools. What he acknowledged that is we've built this whole neighborhood through science and technology that allows us to connect like tonight on Facebook and have Facebook friends. I don't know how much of a friend that is. But the reality is we have to learn to create a brother and a sisterhood. And that means we have to begin to see each other as members of the same family. You're my brother. So we need
Right.
brothers and sisters to support us in this movement for racial and economic justice in America. And so tonight, I'm excited to have a couple of people with us. One of my favorite movies, I have to say, one of my favorite comedies is Meet the Fockers. If you haven't seen it, I'm telling you, when I just need to laugh and relax and lay back, I watch Meet the
Yeah.
Fockers. And so Ben Stiller is
Hey.
joining us here tonight. He's an actor, comedian,
Morning.
a film producer, director,
Yeah.
and writer. And he's been, you know, he's been in so many other films, directed films, produced films. And we're glad to have him tonight. Ben, we're just doing a check-in with you, and we'll do that in just a minute. But we also have joining him my friend Kevin Frazier, who's co-host of Entertainment Tonight. You see him every night during the week, and his wife happens to be a federal prosecutor, and she understands
Public defender.
Public defender. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
that's clear difference. A public defender. But
Big
we
difference.
need people like her on the other side, as you know. That's why we're where we are today. And so we're just glad to have both of you on tonight, and we're just gonna do a
Yes.
check-in because this has been a tough time for everybody. Just to see where your head is right now as we're continuing to process through all of this.
It's an honor to be here with you guys tonight. For me, you know, I think, like a lot of people, I've been trying to figure out how to react to this, especially as a white person, as a parent, as an American. I know how I feel personally, which is sad, frustrated, appalled, and wondering how we're at this point still. And I also feel, honestly, that it's a very, very important moment because a lot of people like me are being reminded of how incredibly real this issue is. And I have to say, you know, just to be honest, I think, you know, going through my life every day, I feel like I'm a pretty liberal guy, a pretty progressive person. I grew up in New York City on the Upper West Side of New York, which is a pretty, you know, progressive place, and have in a very, you know, the community was very diverse that I grew up in. But it's not at top of mind for me as a person every day. What you go through as a Black person in America, and when something like this happens, it's reminding not only the people who are not really even thinking about it, but the people who feel that they're aware of this, how really disconnected we are from the actual reality of it.
Wow.
So let me ask you this quick question before I check with Kevin. Since you said you grew up in New York, right?
Yeah.
Eric Garner, were you able to see what happened with Eric Garner?
Yes.
Eric Garner versus this time for you. What has been the difference as a white male?
You know, if I'm being really honest, I think we get affected by these tragedies in the moment. and they last for a certain amount of time in terms of the media and how much they're top of mind for people in their everyday lives. And you do what you can do in the moment, or what you feel you can do, which is sometimes very little, sometimes, depending on who you are, what your level of activism is. But for me, I feel guilty right now, because I feel guilty because, that happened how many years ago? And here we are now, and the same exact thing is happening, and there's more attention being paid. But the reason there's more attention being paid is because there's so much, the outrage continues. And, I think the reality is I'm all for nonviolent protests, and I think that's, of course, the answer. But the irony is that only when things become violent, when people erupt, does everybody pay attention. And I think that's one of the tough things to deal with, I think.
Wow. Yeah, it is tough to deal with that. Yeah. Kevin, tell us how are you feeling right now? And as he uses that word, the momentum, how do we get that momentum and remain there?
Well, the one beautiful thing, I was in Minnesota yesterday, in Minneapolis, at the memorial, and my spirits were lifted by what I saw. The young people of all race, creeds, and colors coming together, sitting, listening outside the memorial, and taking to heart what they saw. On every corner, people had free food, and it was just a gathering of everyone. And then I went over to the death scene, and there, hundreds, maybe even I'd say 1,000 people gathered, talking, sitting, looking, thinking about what had gone on, but also, once again, free food and this moment where we were coming together. And it all takes me back to September of 1957, when your father went to visit my aunt at the Highlander Folk School. And that Highlander Folk School was a place where people of all race, creeds, and colors could come together to understand their voting rights, to learn how to read, to understand what they needed to do to exercise their rights as an American. And now, I say all these years later, we all need to exercise our rights as Americans together in one system. I say to Jerry, when I think of the civil rights movement, I also think of the eyes that came on the civil rights movement when it was Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney that were found in Philadelphia, Mississippi, in that pile of dirt in that dam. So we need to understand the history as we go forward. And I ask everyone out there to educate yourself. I just showed my 13-year-old and I watched Reconstruction just before this happened, so he could understand the history of this country and where it stands. So I just ask everyone, please educate yourself, and then let's go forward. It's time. Let's go forward.
Yeah, I'd also say that. Sorry, I just was going to say that I think when Eric Garner happened, there was a thing about, this is like, look at this horrible thing that police did, and yeah, it was a horrible thing done by police officers. But when this keeps on happening, you have to look at it in a bigger way, and that's why I got pretty upset when I saw, I think, the National Security Advisor the other day say like there wasn't a systemic racism problem in this country.
Yeah,
that's insane. That's the issue, and you see it in the police because the police have to deal with these kinds of situations every day, so it's going to come out in that way. But it's a bigger problem, and that's the thing that comes up for me the most, is that like we really have to deal with this. I think about learning about your dad growing up and really idolizing him and being taught about the civil rights movement when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s as something that happened, and almost that, look what happened and look what it got for people. But the reality is it's not over in any way. And I think that's something that is starting to change. I feel, at least from what I can see and what my kids are learning, in terms of like, this is something that's a problem that's still going on in a huge way. But I think in my generation, we were sort of taught like, hey, this happened, look where we are now, isn't that great? And we're moving forward. And I think has to be an acceptance of like, no, this is where we are, and there's still so far to go.
There's something that's really interesting happening right now, I believe. For so long and always, the African-American community parents had to talk to their kids. They had to talk or even talk to us about the history of our country and our nation. That's in the African-American community. The tables seem to be turning because just recently that went viral on social media was a young white girl having a talk with her parents about racism and this injustice that we are witnessing. So there's this generation, as you said, that's out there, Kevin, that we're out there, you know, the diversity of our country that's out there this time that wasn't out there the last time in Eric Garner, frankly, in any time past at this level. And it's there's still this, until we see the presence of a certain percentage of white people, does America ever act? Well, can you just speak to that? Because it seems like because the white kids are more in the street now and they're facing those rough cops. Now it's like we really have to lean in and do something, because those are our kids out there and they're coming home and challenging us on our racist beliefs.
And to your point, Dr. King, what do you say to your children? Ben, Kevin, what do you say to your children in this hour when they're watching this?
There's two things I say to them. One, that you have to remember who you are when you go out there, and you have to be careful. But also, it's important to explain to people who you will run into, you will come up against, who will say, well, why can't you keep yourselves safe in your own communities? Why are you violent? And all these things. And I say, you have to understand the history. It's a system that has built upon to devalue us as human beings that goes all the way back to you can make money on cotton, so we need these people to work for free. But today, the important thing is that these young people are coming out, and as they come out now, I say, come out to the King Center, go to the National Civil Rights Museum, go visit the Tuskegee Airmen Museum, and visit these places that will help you shape and understand your history and how we got here in your neighborhoods, so that you know this as much as you know about visiting Mount Vernon and George Washington chopped down the apple tree and all those things. Because if you understand this history, it will help change you fundamentally as a human being. But you have to know that there were covenants set that black people couldn't live in certain areas. We couldn't get to certain places. We couldn't hold certain jobs. And that is the reason why things are the way they are. And people seem to forget about that. And they just say, well, why can't y'all fix it?
Yeah. I'd go even further and say, I think people don't want to hear it, honestly. You know what I mean? As a white person, I would think, a reaction would be like, well, wait a minute, that's not my fault. I didn't do that. Obviously, I feel guilty about it. I feel bad about it. But the reality is that we've kind of not wanted to deal with it, really. I just think that that's like the natural, and that inclination has to be fought against, and that everybody has to be reminded of that, myself included. I think we have to. So it's, I heard, I think it was Bakari Sellers said, you're either racist or you're anti-racist. You have to take a stand against it, and we have to take responsibility. And I'm saying that to myself, that every day that we have to work towards that, because there's a status quo that we're in, that until something comes up, people want to just go forward, and if it's not affecting them on a daily level, they might be sensitive to it, but it's not something that they're thinking about every second. And this is a moment in time where we're being, it's being shouted out, like this has to be dealt with.
And Bernice, I would add on back of that, when I first got to Entertainment Tonight, I started bringing in students from Lincoln for they'd spend 4 weeks during the summer from different black colleges to get a chance to be a part of the system, so that you can take these kids who are still in college and say, here it is. Take a look at it, understand the inner workings, meet the folks that work here, meet the executives, walk around and talk to people, because it's important that we start to expose everyone on every level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So we're getting ready to close out. Just one thing, one challenge that you would put out there, one encouragement to the children, and then one challenge you would put to your peers. What would you say, Ben, Kevin?
Ben, you go ahead.
Well, I mean, I would say to my peers, get out of our comfort zone. Get out of our comfort zone. Put ourselves out there. Connect with with an African American friend. Reach out and ask them the hard questions and say, what can I do to help? What am I not doing that I should be doing? That's what I'm feeling in this moment. It's a time to really sort of question ourselves and go, okay, I thought I was part of the solution, but I'm obviously not doing enough. So if you think you are, well, what more can you do? And then for my kids, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, Ben, go ahead for your kids.
No, for my kids, I would say, this is an important moment we're living in, and listen and see and move forward and do what you feel is right, because this is a moment in time where we're being asked to make a change, and it's up to all of us to do it.
Mm-hmm. To my peers, I would say, what are you doing to introduce diversity into your system and to tell diverse stories so that we hear them? I shouldn't be able to, on my hand, name my favorite Black filmmakers. You know, there are lots of great filmmakers and other people out there that the opportunity has to be presented, and the people who sit in the highest chairs have to acknowledge those filmmakers when the time comes, be it the Oscars or the Grammys or whatever. And then I say to my children, I say, understand the history so when you're confronted by people who tell you otherwise, you can answer them correctly and remind them of what they need to get educated about. And once we educate ourselves, we'll be okay, y'all. We're going to be okay. We just all got to educate ourselves.
Yeah.
We're going to be okay.
Thank you for Bernice. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate you. Yeah. You know that, and I appreciate what you're doing here because this isn't easy. I
appreciate you supporting the platform and coming on tonight, and it isn't easy.
But, it's my honor to be talking to you guys, and I do appreciate what you're doing and getting this kind of protest beside the protests going on in the street. This kind of protest and social media, reaching people who might not be going out on the streets to see this.
Yes. Well, thank you both for joining us tonight. We appreciate you taking out the time. And we will just encourage you to sign our petition because we have to elevate what happened in Minneapolis to a national level to ban the chokehold. I mean, there's so much other things that have to be done as well. So we'll all keep our eyes on it and make sure we do the right thing as we go forward.
Bernie, kudos to Will Packer, what he's trying to do, getting the hate crime laws passed in Georgia and the other things. So, you know, they're doing a lot.
There's a lot of movement down here that we're making in Georgia.
Yes, you are.
We're very busy to make sure that happens this time. So thank you all, and we appreciate you.
God bless you.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Wow.
We said at the same time. Wow.
Yeah. Wow. There's just so much to do. Somebody just thanked us again for having this online protest. So I just want to say to everybody, thank you for becoming a part of the online protest. This is something we need to do, we must do, to keep our eyes focused, our attention vigilant in this period of time, because if not, it'll just go back. My father had a quote that said, one of the tragedies still of human history is that the children of darkness are often more zealous and determined than the children of light. And I told people before, I just want to disprove my father on these particular words. I want it to be that the children of light are more vigilant and determined than the children of darkness.
I think this next generation is about to do it. I mean,
they have been very vigilant.
They are very, and we just commend you. Again, this online protest was started to synchronize with those who are nonviolently protesting, amplifying your heart, your zeal, your determination to move culture forward. We are synchronizing with you, and we are saying ditto, yes, and amen. And we are right here. This generation, I'm Generation X. And I'm not going to say what. And Dr. King, we have your back. We have your back.
Except for I'm not X. I'm at the end of the Boomer generation, at the beginning of the X generation. But
that's even better.
I feel like I'm with this millennial generation.
But that's even better, Dr. King.
Synchronized with them. Yeah.
Because
get my age.
Yeah, baby boomers, Generation X, the millennials in the street, Gen Z in the street. And so we have your back, and we just want you to know that we are so amazingly proud of the work that you're doing, and just thank you. So what's up next, Dr. King? Who do we have? Some amazing brothers. You want to tell everybody who we have up next, or you want me to do it?
I want you to start.
Okay, well, tell you what, we have an amazing brother. Yeah. Oh, she's about to turn. Dr. King used to be a DJ, everybody.
She used to
be a DJ. She used to mix. So we got Bone Crusher coming up. Bone Crusher. And Bone Crusher took some time off to really focus on his family, to make sure he was preparing this generation to do the work that's happening in the street. So welcome, Bone Crusher.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we have joining him tonight a friend of mine, an actor that you all have seen on Owns Green Leaf. None other than Lamont Rutger. He started as a daytime soap opera actor with As the World Turns and All of My Children. And he's been in many of Tyler Perry's films. Why Did I Get Married? Why Did I Get Married 2? I'm waiting for Why Did I Get Married 3? And of course, Meet the Browns. We can't see Lamont, but hopefully he will be joining us in just a moment. But Bone Crusher, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we want to do, hey, Lamont.
Hey
there. Hey there.
Family, how y'all doing?
We appreciate you supporting us again. Lamont has supported our work at the King Center, and we appreciate him coming on tonight to support us again in this online protest. We want to kind of just check in with you, our brothers, because this has been a real tough time. This has been I don't know how you describe this moment. There's a barrage of feelings and emotions that people are going through now, but we just want to check in with each of you to see where you are, just mentally right now, emotionally right now. We have some other questions we want to ask you, but just checking with you.
I'll go first, brother. It's an honor to be on here, Dr. King and Bonita. I'm happy to be a part of this. Me and my wife, or ground zero, if you will, we stay right downtown in the middle of the protest. And it's encouraging and very enlightening and very spiritual to see how these young people are changing the narrative by marching peacefully and creating a new way for a new generation. I'm just so excited to be a part of history, to watch how our youth are really impactful and trying to make some type of change for a new direction for our people. It's very outstanding. It's very outstanding.
Lamont, what about you? How are you processing all of this?
Yeah, I think this is always an incredible, I feel like every month is an incredible moment in history. And not always because of this type of impasse, even for all the incredible reasons why every month is a moment in history. We're changing lives and doing incredible things all the time. So it's unfortunate that sometimes very significant moments of change come as a result of tragedy. But I look at every event just that as opportunity. We don't want anything bad to happen to anybody, and as selfishly as it sounds, especially our people. But everything that happens, I look at as an opportunity to make sure that this is a chance to step up, step forward, stand up straight, put your shoulders back, open your mouth, lean into it, hold on to each other, and be part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. It's going to sometimes require things of you that you didn't even know you were capable of. It's going to require things of you that you weren't ready to do. At the same time, sometimes what those requirements are not just, running out the door, hitting the street, but it's also learning how to be still. It's learning how to listen. I think what's powerful about our time together right now is helping people to not just have a forum, but also to get some insight, to get some leadership, to get some direction. So I look at each one of these moments, and unfortunately, every spirit that we've lost, all these really beautiful Black men and all these beautiful Black women that have been lost or murdered or compromised in some way, even the people that haven't been killed, right? They're still tragedies just the same because they've been maimed, injured, harmed, traumatized in so many ways. This is still an opportunity for us to continue to work toward figuring it out. And we cannot fall asleep on the job. As soon as we fall asleep, something else, I believe, like this happens because we don't continue to stay committed to the work, sometimes to stay committed to the conversation. So this is just another reminder for me to continue to keep our feet on the gas pedal and continue to work together and continue to push toward positive social change at all times and nonviolent positive social change.
Right. So
yeah, thank you for that. I want to ask this question. I'm itching to ask this question. What would you tell, and maybe you've already had this opportunity, what would you tell a white male right now? And I'm focusing on white men because we know in the hierarchical system, the white male is at the top. Many of these acts that have been done throughout history have been done by white men with the complicity of white women. But what would you tell them in this hour in terms of what they need to do?
Anybody?
I guess I'll
Oh,
jump back in. Yeah, I think the thing about it is what's difficult for a lot of white men, white folks. Period. And I think Ben also spoke very courageously about it. Is the accountability, regardless of how much, yeah, we might perpetuate some of our own challenges, as much as there are things that are happening all around us that might not be their fault. I think one of the things that is very difficult for a lot of men is their feelings are hurt, their egos are in the way, and on top of that, the privilege that they've been so accustomed to is being challenged and is being compromised, and they don't know what to do. It's become such a mode of operation that anything that shakes up how things have been done, right? Or when America used to be great, or whatever these ideologies are, it puts them in a situation where they want to fight back and push back, as opposed to really understanding, look, this never belonged to you alone in the first place. This was always, and at least always should have been, a shared environment, a shared community, a shared economy, shared equal, equitable access to clean air, food, and water, a quality education. So it's understanding that there's no, to really challenge their own concept of entitlement, and really understanding that their advantages, that which many of them don't want to give up, if they don't want to give anything up, they're perpetuating the problem. And if you're
Wow.
not willing to
Yeah.
share, what you're
Yes.
inherently doing is
Wow.
creating classism and racism and sexism, and just continuing the problem. So there's a real
Yeah.
challenge with getting people to understand that even though it might not be their fault, they're still benefiting from the institutionalized structures and laws and hierarchy, as you said, and they've got to be open to the conversation of letting other people uh, into that access door of opportunity.
Yeah. And that's called doing the anti racist work. See, a lot of people can't identify as being racist, but can you commit to doing the anti racist work? So, Wayne, to Dr. King's question.
right. I think that, as a young man growing up in Atlanta, um, growing up under the teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King and Maynard Jackson, and one thing I understood that my grandpa always told me about anything and any color, any race of people, that we're all human. And once we figured that out, and once people realized that the only thing I only want in life is the same thing you want out of life, it's a place for my family to be able to have a nice place to stay, the food to be clean, the water to be clean, the place to for us all to have a
Absolutely.
inspirational vibe with each other. And once we realize that, and I think that that's what's happening now, people are starting to see that everybody's hurting. It isn't
Yeah.
just a black or a white thing; it's a human thing. And humanity has to come together in a way to express greatness in all of us. As I look out my window right now, it's just as many of our Caucasian brothers and sisters out there in the margins as our own. And it becomes the narrative of we have to work together in order to become a greater America and a greater world. It is not about separatism. It is not about making America great again. It's about making the world great again. It's about inspiring people to become something more than themselves. And it's to inspire them to become themselves and look at themselves in the mirror and say, you know what? I'm just as human as the next man.
Yeah.
I am just worthy of love and compassion as the next man. And that's the thing that I tell my brothers and my Caucasian brothers when I talk to them, and then we have a great understanding that we have to stick together in order to make this world work better for all of us. And I
Yeah.
think that that's the key to this. When other races see that I want the same thing that you want, and that's all I want. I'm not here to dominate the planet. I'm only here to embrace the planet and live and grow and see it become better for all of us. That's when it becomes a better narrative for the world. not just America, the
Yeah,
world.
and you know what? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, brother. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's right on point. And one of the other points that to some degree is maybe somewhat of a counterpoint to my earlier point is I think the other conversation that's important is also to talk to our white counterparts and
Mm-hmm.
and listen. If
Right.
we're always coming at them, blaming them for everything, calling them, the devil and blaming for all the wrong that's gone on, we're
Mm-hmm.
not really listening. We're not being receptive to what are your feelings, what are your fears, where do
Exactly.
they come from, what are they rooted in, um, you know, what what experiences or what levels or layers of evidence do you have to support where that coming from? Talk to me, right? So I think sometimes what we forget is what we're often getting is a result of someone else's fear,
Exactly.
as a result of someone else's actualness and insecurity, and what we get oftentimes is the overcompensation in their behavior and in things that are structured and institutionalized because of their fear and insecurity. I mean, if we don't have the pinnacle of white male inadequacy occupying the White House, I don't know
Right.
when we've had any greater example of it.
Correct.
So just
Correct.
as much as we vilify him and realize how unfortunately not we know that he's not bright, we know that he is not good at business. He tries to run the country like he's the CEO of the United States of America, and he can't even run his own businesses adequately.
Right.
So we're dealing with a situation where it's so obvious that he doesn't know what he's doing. But what's more interesting, actually, to me,
Mm-hmm.
is I would love to know why. I would love to know why he behaves the way he does. I want to meet his parents. I'd like to know what kind of counseling he's had. What kind of we went through a period of time where we were trying to get some kind of actual mental health
Right.
profile on this man, and that got suppressed. The doctor was considered a quack, but I really think there's some other stuff going on that we're never really dealing with, getting to the root of where some of this ideology really comes from personally.
Yeah.
We can talk about the fear of white genetic annihilation. We can talk about, all this stuff, but I really do think there's validity in really just kind of listening to, like, why are you pushing this kind of perspective and this kind of ideology? Why is this your behavior? Why are you culpable and complicit when one of your peers does or says certain things? Why are you not, the anti-racist as opposed to just kind of going along with the program? There are reasons. I believe, again, to my man Bone Crusher's point, if we're all human, then even the perpetuators of crime and violence, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
there's humanity in there somewhere.
I'm,
So
I'm,
trying to speak to it, listen to it, and understand it, so
mm-hmm.
we can get even to that healing. Because when
Yeah.
that healing happens, I
Yeah.
think that also prevents a lot of the other hate and destruction that happens.
I think he's
Yeah.
his problem realistically is that he's a level 9 narcissist, and something happened to him in his youth that
Yes.
created this person that he is today.
Yeah.
The
Very
Donald
much
Trump,
so.
the Donald Trump that you see today is not the Donald Trump when he was 5 and 6 years old.
Right.
It's a fact that narcissists kill off the person that they were before in order for them to
Mm-hmm.
create this shell of themselves and a
Right.
fake tin armor that keeps them away from any kind of pain, hurt, any kind of place where they can feel kind of doubt in themselves. And he constantly pushes the narrative of hate and displacement only to defer his own inadequacies in himself.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
it becomes the anytime you look at him, he looks like a child because he is a
You're
child.
right. You're
He's still
right.
the same. He's still
He's
the
very
same.
juvenile, that's for
Right.
sure.
Yes, you're
He
right.
he's still the same 9-year-old Donald that he was back then and he is now.
Right.
Yeah. He
And he
just
Right.
kicked.
So to your point, it's too bad we can't get to know the 5-year-old
Mm-hmm.
before the 9-year-old that we know
Right.
now.
yes,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, Lamont, I think you said something important too, though.
Mhm.
And regardless of who it is, we need to know the why. Because one thing about nonviolence, we try to seek to understand the person. We try to make sure we attack issues and don't attack that person. So when you begin to understand the why, you can begin to navigate the issues. And so that's very, very important.
And I
Go
wanted
ahead,
to
Doctor.
mention also what you were expounding upon is like the heart and soul of what my father talked about when he said we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or together we'll be forced to perish as fools. And I always tell people that word learn in there is very key. And we must learn to live together, which means we do have to ask those questions and listen and try to understand. Because that's what I'm always saying to people, why are they like this? What is the history that led this person to connect to the KKK? And things of that nature. So we appreciate you all
That's right.
sharing your
How
perspectives
does
on
that
tonight.
recruitment even happen in the first place?
Right.
Exactly. What
Well,
is that
Dr.
void?
King, we've
And
talked
you
to
said something.
KKK people, and
Yeah, and they
most of
said it.
yeah,
Yeah, all the time.
most of them are looking for a place to belong.
Belong. And it's no
Yeah,
different than
That's right.
in our community, those young people who join gangs looking for a family and a
Absolutely.
place to belong
Absolutely.
and to be affirmed.
Absolutely.
Uh,
That's real.
Right.
so when we
yeah,
see the
And
threads,
it's
then
it's
we're better
it's
able
where
to
that
address
whole
this.
pattern of the whole pattern of insurgents and toys and
Hmm.
child soldiers and various parts of the world. It's the same thing. Often people in some form are abandoned, feel disconnected. They don't
Right.
feel like they're actually part of the what the American dream is. And
Right.
someone else is able to come in and feed on that insecurity and that vulnerability and feed them a different kind of ideology. And to your earlier statement, instead of be continuing to be a child of light, they're able to now be kind of conditioned into becoming a child that starts to be clouded with this darkness in their heart and their spirit
Mhm.
instead. So I
yeah.
think if we can find a way to yes continue to protest and stand up and fight the power and all that, I'm as black revolutionary as you can get in some of those ways, but just the same I try to be very balanced in my approaches to these solutions, and understand that if we still don't speak to the love and to the light and to the compassion and to the enlightenment that exists in every person, then we often
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
all we do is create greater conflict. I see a lot of protesters out there. They're screaming in the cops' faces, and they're trying. I mean, they're so angry. I get it, but I see very few people saying, hey, Mister, Mrs. Officer, or whatever. Like, hey, you know, what's going on? Talk to me. Hey, is this necessary? Like, sometimes I don't see as much work with people trying to diffuse as much as trying to meet aggression with aggression.
And
Yeah,
then too, Lamont, you have to ask
it
the
goes both
why.
ways.
Yeah,
But
you have to ask
you
the
have to look at the
why.
Right,
other side
exactly.
too. On the
Yeah,
other
Exactly.
side,
That's
the
my point.
yeah,
officers have a responsibility to diffuse
Absolutely.
as well. The other
Absolutely.
They
night in
do.
Atlanta, they could have said to those young people, "Hey, we're concerned about your safety and want you to get home.
That's right.
So just be careful out here and get on home instead of breaking the windows and
right. Because
tasing them.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
Now they're
the
nuts.
thing.
traumatized for
It's
life."
nuts.
And the thing is,
That's what
what
I'm
broke
saying.
my
It makes no
heart, Dr.
sense.
King, is that the young man put his hand on the steering wheel. And that's what we teach our young men. The girl put her hands out the car. The young man put his hands on the steering wheel. And so my question then became, what do you say to our children if putting your hands on the steering wheel, if that doesn't work, what do we say? What do we say?
I
Lamont,
mean,
what do we say,
it's just
Lamont?
that's my point. It makes no sense. I mean, we lost Philando Castile. I mean, we get a countless list of some of the people we've lost in recent years. They complied. They did what they were supposed to do. They did what they were asked to do. They
So
weren't.
what do we
I
say
mean,
now
even
though?
when
What
people were charged, yeah, even when they were charged with fighting back, they're just trying to get your hands from around their neck or stop you from body slamming them into the concrete. So
what do you
that's
say?
where there's got to be there's you still have to say follow follow the rules. You
Follow the
still have to
rules.
say do it the right way,
Yeah.
even though there's the possibility that someone on the other side of that equation may not do their part.
30 seconds, Bone. What do you say?
The lack of, we just don't have, there's only so much control we have.
Bone, you're muted.
You're supposed to do the best you can do and everything you're asked to do in that moment.
Yeah. So I think Bone, you muted yourself. So yeah, we have to head out, Bone. I don't know how you muted yourself, but we cannot hear you. But we hear your heart, and we know that you're doing an amazing job with your family. Would have loved to hear what you had to say. So, Lamont,
thank you so much,
thank you
Lamont.
so
we appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, please sign our petition.
I adore you, Dr. King, Benita.
Thank you.
Please sign our petition and have others to do the same.
God bless you.
God bless you. So I want to say what somebody just said on the line. It says, what we say now is we need real accountability.
Oh, yeah. That's
very important. And so we're going to bring on Vanetta West, who's an instructor in nonviolence with the King Center. Vanetta, I know you've been hearing all of the conversation and the heart. I know you just love listening to what Lamont was talking about. The first part, yes. Benita and Vanetta, he was talking about a shared space, and he started going about all the share. And I said, that's the beloved community that he was talking about.
Right.
You know,
yes.
and then, you know, he talked about understanding, seeking first to understand than to be understood, which is at the heart and soul of nonviolence, being other-centered. So let's just talk about a nugget tonight that people can take away from them, because this is a nonviolent online protest.
Well, I think the nugget tonight is going back to the intent and the ultimate goal of nonviolence, which for Dr. King, for Coretta Scott King, and in Kenyan nonviolence is the beloved community. And the beloved community, Coretta Scott King said, is realistic and achievable. It's a place of equity and justice and love and dignity for all people. And they believed, and we believe, we can get there. And to do that, Dr. King believed we have to eradicate these triple evils: racism, war, poverty, or racism, militarism, poverty. And sometimes he called poverty capitalism, just to talk about the structure that cultivates poverty. And so we can get to that beloved community. We have to eradicate these evils. And the way to do that is through this love-centered, with love at its foundation, philosophy, nonviolence, which doesn't have a hyphen in it, by the way. Everyone who's watching, Kenyan nonviolence does not have a hyphen, because it's not just the opposite of violence. It doesn't mean that you don't have violent intent or you don't use violence. It's a posture of living and of thinking. And so this philosophy can help us get to this beloved community, which is realistic and achievable. And this philosophy and this strategy is practical. You can apply it because it has 6 principles, which is the way of thinking, and it has 6 steps. So sometimes, and this is the last thing I'll leave you with in this nugget, we try to use the steps without using the principles. And that's what we see a lot happening with Dr. King's philosophy. You have people saying, I'm practicing nonviolence because I'm not hitting anybody. I'm not shooting anybody. So I'm not practicing physical violence, but it's a posture that's love-centered. It's strategic non-cooperation with evil. And so nonviolence is not simply, I don't hit, I don't shoot. It's the whole demeanor in which we're presenting ourselves. And so we can build this beloved community with nonviolence, but we can't practice the steps without the principles. Meaning, in order to practice these steps, which are the wheels, we have to have the engine. And the engine is these principles, which inform our way of thinking and give us the heart to stand when somebody's treating us without dignity and say, I have an ultimate goal. And the ultimate goal, again, is the beloved community, which is realistic and achievable, dignity, love, and justice for every human being on this earth. And we believe we can get there. And we're seeing us start to get there, even though we see violence and we see looting and we see different things. It's just people saying they want the beloved community and they don't know how to get it. Everybody's looking for the beloved community. Dr. King called it, I believe, when he said, I've been to the promised land, he was referring to the beloved community. And he just said, I may not get there with you, but I believe we'll get there. And he believed nonviolence, even that night when people say he no longer believed in nonviolence at the end of his life. in the speech that he gave the night before he was assassinated, he said, our choice today is still nonviolence or non-existence.
And what you're explaining really is about a lifestyle. We at the King Center, one of the things that we focus heavily on is the lifestyle of nonviolence. That we not just see it merely as a tactic. And I think that's a distinction that people need to understand, because when we say it doesn't work, that's when we're using it just as a mere tactic, and we're using it as if I follow this here is supposed to happen in response. But really, as we said before, it works on you first on the inside. It makes you a nonviolent person, and your nonviolent energy. We know that energy attracts energy. Yes, you can attract violence against Daddy and them. They had violence against them, but at the same time, they were able to transform people through their nonviolent posture and this nonviolent way of life. And it's something that is a everyday, daily process. It's becoming a practitioner. Before you even get to this stage where we are now, which is in the protest mode, you're already moving in nonviolence in your daily interactions and your
making a
daily
personal commitment. That's the action.
Home, right. You're utilizing. So you're saturated with this whole philosophy and methodology. So we wanted to make sure that as we do this nonviolent online protest, that we give clarity to nonviolence as taught and lived, by Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King. So, I'm going to say that loud, Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King, because Coretta Scott King is the reason that we really have the institutionalization of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., my father's philosophy and methodology, because she was the one that insisted that we really build an institution, the King Center, where people can be developed and educated in nonviolence in future generations, because she believed it worked no matter what the circumstances, especially if we start with people when they come out of the womb. As young as one, how we approach kids at one and how we bring them up is all a part of it. So if we do that from the beginning, we won't end up with certain behaviors that we see witnessed now in our society.
Yeah. Can I add a question?
Policies.
Well, let me tell them how to get the nonviolence, because I want to make sure that they know how to take this training, and make sure, if you're interested in learning more about the philosophy and the methodology, if you're interested in changing corporate culture, if you're interested in really learning how to mobilize and organize, we need you to email us at nv365@thekingcenter.org. That's nv365@thekingcenter.org, and leave us your information, and we'll contact you for our upcoming virtual training. We want to make sure we get this information to you. So please, nv365@thekingcenter.org.
The last thing I wanted to say about nonviolence, people say it doesn't work. And we always say nonviolence works if you work it. It's actually something you have to be strategic about, and you have to apply it. But I had this revelation the other day, and I thought about, how Dr. King left this earth. And I said, if nonviolence wasn't working, he wouldn't have been assassinated. Mm-hmm. Because you don't take somebody out of here who's not doing something that's changing systems and legislation and policies. And I think it's proof that he was going to do something even more powerful with this philosophy of nonviolence, like economic justice and helping to end wars and prevent wars, which have big money in them. And that was the thing that they said nonviolence is working. It's changing laws. It's getting people thinking about strategy. It's getting people out of responding to violence in violent ways. And in this world, systems want us to respond to violence with violence because they want to stay in place, and violence is a descending spiral. So what he was going to accomplish, and what we now can accomplish with nonviolence, is that we can change and deconstruct and put in place the beloved community.
Exactly. And part of that process, there's a continuum of change, as we know. Protest is a part of that. Negotiation is a part of that. And a big piece and part of that is has to do with legislative change. Always there was some kind of either judicial or legislative change in the movement that my father led. In '55, it was judicial change through the Supreme Court case that ruled bus segregation unconstitutional. As we move forward through all of the other movements, the sit-ins, the freedom rides, it was about the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And then in Selma, when we saw Bloody Sunday, which did not start in Selma, there was a killing in Marion, Alabama, my mother's hometown. Just before that, there really was the impetus for the Selma to Montgomery March. And there's so much we can learn about this that led to the Voting Rights Act. And then in my father's assassination, he had been working on open housing in Chicago in 1966. And eventually at his death, to honor him, President Johnson just said, we have to pass this legislation. And so we passed the, what is it called? The 1968 Act of, it's not open housing. Y'all come on.
Fair Housing.
Fair Housing Act.
Fair
exactly. And so we want you to know a part of our citizenship responsibility is voting. Voting, but it's not, voting is not the answer. Voting is part of the answer. So I want to clarify that as we begin to come to a close, because we keep hounding on, we got to get people to register, we got to get people to vote, and all that, and all those things are true. But we have to help people to understand that voting is a part of a whole continuum, and it's a part of an engagement that happens even past the election. There are ways in which we hold our elected officials accountable. There are organizations that are looking at and working on legislation and lobbying on Capitol Hill and in your state houses and down at your city hall. And we have to stay in touch with those kind of entities and efforts and organizations, because your vote alone, no, it will not change anything, but your collective energy with others as you vote and as you stay engaged and hold elected officials accountable, make the demands on the legislation that we'd like to see, like the chokehold ban that just happened in Minneapolis that we're trying to get all across this nation. That's where change begins to happen. And so let's not look at this as I'm not going to vote, because guess what? It's an ingredient to our change. It's an ingredient to getting justice. And if you leave out certain ingredients inside of something that you're making, it can mess the dish up. And so, look at voting as one of the most important ingredients to justice, as opposed to, I'm not going to vote, it doesn't work. Well, if you don't as an ingredient, then nothing's going to work, because it's important that we continue to participate in our government and make our voices heard that way, as well as other ways. And so we want to remind you, with that in mind, as a citizen of the United States of America, to sign this petition that we have on tonight, because we really want to make sure that we accomplish banning the chokehold. There's a thing called 8 Can't Wait in terms of police accountability. We want to make sure that we're raising our voices across these cities and municipalities and in counties across the country in holding law enforcement accountable. We want to make sure that we are also demanding that our law enforcement community begin to embrace some of those recommendations, which is a part of the 8 Can't Wait that came out of the Obama's task force on 21st century policing. These are all things that we are looking to see change in. There's so many changes, and we cannot stop. My father said in Memphis that if something happened to him, you cannot stop in Memphis. And I'm telling you right now, when the protests on the street cease, we cannot stop the momentum of bringing true justice and true peace, to this country, which is not merely the absence of tension. We don't want quietness. We want to see racial and economic justice and equity in this country. So thank you for joining us on tonight. We have some very exciting guests to join us on tomorrow night on the online protest. And we look forward to seeing you then. hearing your voices, hearing your comments, and stay engaged. This is a long struggle, and we cannot let up. We have momentum now. Let's keep it going. God bless you and have a great night.